The Corvidae Empire's latest victory transmission played on every screen in Earth Defense Command headquarters, their crystalline ships dancing through space with mathematical precision. Admiral Elena Santos watched the footage for the 100th time, her weathered face illuminated by the holographic display. Another human fleet reduced to atoms, their best tactics and technology proving worthless against an enemy that had perfected the art of war through pure logic and computation. Our problem, a voice called from the back of the briefing room, is that we're trying to out-perfect perfection. All heads turned to face Dr. Maya Patel, her dark hair tied in a messy bun, wearing a lab coat covered in equations and coffee stains. She wasn't supposed to be in this meeting of Earth's highest military command, but she had a habit of showing up where she wasn't invited. Dr. Patel, Admiral Santos said, "This is a restricted briefing, and I have a restricted proposal," Maya replied, striding forward to the central holotable. She plugged in a data crystal, and the image of the Corvidae fleet was replaced by what looked like a child's drawing of a spaceship rendered in 3 dimensions. The room erupted in murmurs. The vessel violated every principle of spacecraft design. Its hull was asymmetrical, with sections that seemed to be welded on at random. Weapon emplacements pointed in apparently useless directions. The engine configuration looked like someone had played pickup sticks with fusion drives. "What exactly are we looking at, Doctor?" Santos asked, her tone carefully neutral. "The HMS Absurdity," Maya answered, grinning. "The dumbest warship humanity will ever build, and our best chance at survival." "This is a joke," General Chen interrupted. "We're losing this war, and you're proposing we waste resources on this." Maya's grin widened. 3 months ago, my team made a discovery while analyzing debris from the Battle of Proxima Centauri. The Corvidae's targeting systems showed a curious flaw. The more irregular and unpredictable a target's design, the longer it took their battle computers to achieve weapons lock. She manipulated the hologram, showing analysis of various space battles. "Look here. Their weapons achieve perfect accuracy against our latest destroyers within 0.3 seconds of target acquisition. But against this civilian cargo ship, the image showed an old, patched-up freighter. Target lock took nearly 3 seconds. 3 seconds is an eternity in space combat," Admiral Santos mused. "Exactly," Maya said. "The Corvidae have evolved and developed their technology around perfect mathematical principles. Their neural networks literally cannot process deliberate imperfection. It's like trying to divide by 0. Their systems freeze up trying to predict movement patterns that intentionally make no sense." She expanded the hologram of the absurdity. "This ship breaks every rule of spacecraft design. The hull geometry creates sensor shadows that shouldn't exist. The weapon platforms operate on randomized targeting solutions. The engines run on deliberately misaligned power curves. Even the internal layout defies standard ship architecture." "You want to build a ship that's intentionally wrong?" General Chen asked incredulously. "I want to build a ship that's so wrong it breaks their concept of right," Maya corrected. "Every system will operate on principles of controlled chaos. The ship's computer will introduce random variables into all calculations. Shield harmonics will fluctuate based on probability curves derived from lottery numbers. We'll even pipe human music through the power distribution network." Admiral Santos studied the design with newfound interest. "And you believe this will work?" "I believe the Corvidae's greatest strength is their perfect logic, and like any strength taken to an extreme, it's become a weakness. They've optimized themselves into a corner." Maya's expression turned serious. "They can't adapt to genuine irrationality because they've eliminated it from their thinking. We don't need a better ship. We need one that's worse in all the right ways." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. It was ridiculous, borderline insane, and yet somehow made a twisted kind of sense. "The materials and construction requirements?" Santos asked. "We can build it from salvage. In fact, that's preferable. The more mismatched the components, the better. I've already identified suitable parts in the Pacific scrapyard. We can have it space-worthy in 2 months. And the crew? We'll need to be special, Maya admitted. We need people who can think sideways, who can embrace chaos as a tactical advantage. Artists, jazz musicians, quantum physicists, anyone who's comfortable with uncertainty and improvisation. Admiral Santos stood, her decision visible in her posture. Dr. Patel, this is either brilliant or the most elaborate suicide mission I've ever heard proposed. Either way, I don't see that we have much choice. You have your authorization. Build your impossible ship. Maya's eyes lit up. Thank you, Admiral. One last thing. We'll need a commanding officer who understands the philosophy behind the design. Someone who can think like the ship. You have someone in mind. Commander Sarah Chen, General Chen's daughter. The general sputtered. The one who was disciplined for executing a combat maneuver based on a dance routine. The same, Maya smiled. She's perfect. As the briefing room cleared, Maya stayed behind, staring at the hologram of her creation. The Corvidae had spent millennia perfecting the art of war, but they'd never faced an enemy willing to embrace imperfection as a weapon. It was time to show them that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in doing things right. It was in being willing to do things wrong. The HMS Absurdity rotated slowly in the holographic display, its impossible angles and illogical design, a testament to humanity's capacity for inspired madness. The war was about to take a very strange turn. The Pacific Scrapyard sprawled across 50 square kilometers of ocean, a graveyard of humanity's spacefaring ambitions. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the deck of a floating construction platform, watching welding sparks cascade from what would become the HMS Absurdity's command module, if you could call a repurposed lunar mining hab welded to the cargo hold of a decommissioned colony ship command module. It's wrong, Chief Engineer Marcus Wong declared, consulting his tablet. It's all gloriously, perfectly wrong. Sarah smiled. That's the idea, isn't it? Look at these power readings. Marcus held up the tablet, showing energy flow patterns that resembled a jazz symphony more than engineering data. We've got fusion reactors from 3 different centuries working in concert. They should be tearing each other apart, but Dr. Patel's quantum harmonics are somehow keeping them stable through their instability. Above them, massive construction drones guided a twisted spire of meteorite-scarred hull plating into position. The metal had come from the outer layers of an ancient generation ship, its surface etched with patterns by centuries of micro-impacts. According to the original blueprints, it was supposed to be part of the stern. They were attaching it to the bow. How's the crew selection coming? Marcus asked, wincing as a particularly loud grinding sound echoed across the water. Sarah pulled up her own data display. Interesting mix. We got a jazz pianist running weapons control, a chaos theory mathematician for navigation, and a contemporary artist designing our tactical displays. Dr. Patil insisted our sensor officer be a wine taster. A wine taster. She says anyone who can distinguish subtle flavor notes will be perfect for detecting anomalies in sensor data. Sarah shrugged. At this point, I'm not questioning her logic. Speaking of not questioning things, Marcus gestured to a newly arrived shipment. Those are supposed to be our point defense turrets. They came from a luxury space yacht's skeet shooting range. Sarah watched as the construction teams began mounting the ornate, gold-plated turrets at seemingly random angles. Well, they're certainly decorative. Commander, Dr. Patel's voice carried across the platform as she hurried toward them, her lab coat now adorned with even more equations and what looked like pizza stains. You need to see this. We just ran the first full sensor stealth test. The 3 gathered around her portable holographic projector. It showed a standard military sensor sweep passing over the partially completed absurdity. The ship's profile on the scan looked like a sensor malfunction, a blob of contradictory data that seemed to shift and change with each pass. The Corvidae's targeting systems are going to have fits, Maya said gleefully. It's like trying to take a clear photo of a Salvador Dali painting during an earthquake. A shadow fell over the projection as a massive naval transport ship approached the construction site. Sarah recognized the markings of the Defense Procurement Office, right on schedule. "Here comes trouble," she muttered. Admiral Santos had warned them this was coming. The more traditional elements of Earth's military leadership weren't happy about the resources being wasted on this project. The transport's boarding ramp descended, and a team of procurement officials in pristine uniforms marched onto the platform, led by a stone-faced Commodore. "Commander Chen," the Commodore called out, his voice dripping with disdain. "We're here to conduct an engineering review of this project." Sarah stepped forward, positioning herself between the officials and Dr. Patel. "Of course, Commodore. Though I should warn you, our engineering principles are somewhat unconventional." Unconventional. The Commodore consulted his tablet. "According to these readings, you're violating 17 different safety protocols, 32 construction standards, and at least 5 laws of physics." "Only 5. Maya piped up from behind Sarah. "We must be falling behind schedule." The Commodore's face reddened. "This is not a joke, Doctor. We're fighting a war for survival. These resources could be used to build proper warships. Like the proper warships, the corvidae keep turning into expanding clouds of plasma." Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp. "Sir, with all due respect, conventional thinking isn't winning this war. We need to try something different." "Different?" The Commodore gestured at the absurdity's growing form. "This isn't different, Commander. This is madness." "Exactly." Dr. Patel stepped forward, her eyes bright with intensity. "The Corvidae's greatest weakness is their inability to comprehend madness. They've evolved beyond it, engineered it out of their thinking. But humanity, we've elevated madness to an art form." She manipulated her holographic controls, showing simulated battle projections. "Every traditional warship we build, they can predict and counter before it fires its first shot. But this, the absurdity's chaotic form, appeared in the simulation, its movements following patterns based on weather systems and butterfly migrations. They can't predict what they can't understand." The Commodore opened his mouth to argue, then froze as new readings appeared on his tablet. The first live fire tests of the absurdity's weapons systems had just completed. The results defied every combat doctrine ever written, and showed a hit ratio that shouldn't have been possible with such apparently random targeting. "How?" he whispered. "We're not aiming where they're going to be," Sarah explained. "We're aiming where they won't expect us to aim, which is exactly where they'll end up trying to avoid where they think we're actually aiming." The Commodore read the test results 3 times, his expression slowly shifting from disgust to bewilderment to something approaching wonder. Finally, he looked up at the impossible ship taking shape above them. "I'll need to report this to command," he said quietly. "Tell them to send more skeet-shooting turrets." Maya called after him as he walked away. The gold plating really ties the whole aesthetic together. As the procurement team departed, Sarah turned to her unlikely crew of misfits and dreamers. "Back to work, everyone. We've got a lot more rules to break." Above them, the HMS Absurdity continued to grow, each new edition making it look more impossible. Soon, they would show the galaxy that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its technology or its numbers, but its ability to embrace the absurd. The Corvidae were about to learn that there was nothing more dangerous than an enemy who didn't play by the rules, because they'd forgotten the rules entirely. The Corvidae patrol fleet emerged from hyperspace like a work of crystalline art, their ships arranged in mathematically perfect formations. Commander Sarah Chen watched them approach on the Absurdity's main view screen, though view screen might have been too generous a term for the patchwork of salvage displays, showing information in formats ranging from standard tactical readouts to abstract interpretive dance. "They're scanning us," reported Lieutenant Jazz Williams from her weapons station, her fingers tapping an unconscious rhythm on her console. The former pianist had insisted on replacing the traditional targeting interface with something resembling a musical keyboard. "What are they seeing?" Sarah asked. Maya Patel, who had refused to stay behind on Earth, pulled up a simulation of the Corvidae sensor returns. The absurdity appeared as a constantly shifting blur of contradictory data, like a glitch in reality itself. "They're running their scans multiple times," Maya reported gleefully. "Their systems can't resolve us into a coherent image. It's like trying to photograph a soap bubble with a quantum camera." The ship's quantum communication array crackled to life, carrying a transmission that somehow managed to sound both perfectly modulated and deeply confused. "Unidentified vessel," a crystalline voice announced. "Your configuration appears to be critically compromised. Power down immediately for emergency assistance and salvage." Sarah nodded to her communications officer, a former poetry slam champion. "This is Commander Chen of the HMS Absurdity. We appreciate your concern, but we're operating exactly as designed." A long pause followed. Sarah could almost imagine the Corvida crew struggling to process that statement. Sarah stepped forward, positioning herself between the officials and Dr. Pottle. "Of course, Commodore. Though I should warn you, our engineering principles are somewhat unconventional." "Unconventional?" The Commodore consulted his tablet. "According to these readings, you're violating 17 different safety protocols, 32 construction standards, and at least 5 laws of physics." "Only 5. Maya piped up from behind Sarah. "We must be falling behind schedule." The Commodore's face reddened. "This is not a joke, Doctor. We're fighting a war for survival. These resources could be used to build proper warships. Like the proper warships, the Corvidae keep turning into expanding clouds of plasma." Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp. "Sir, with all due respect, conventional thinking isn't winning this war. We need to try something different." "Different?" The Commodore gestured at the absurdity's growing form. "This isn't different, Commander. This is madness." "Exactly." Dr. Pottle stepped forward, her eyes bright with intensity. "The Corvidae's greatest weakness is their inability to comprehend madness. They've evolved beyond it, engineered it out of their thinking. But humanity, we've elevated madness to an art form." She manipulated her holographic controls, showing simulated battle projections. "Every traditional warship we build, they can predict and counter before it fires its first shot. But this..." The absurdity's chaotic form appeared in the simulation, its movements following patterns based on weather systems and butterfly migrations. "They can't predict what they can't understand." The Commodore opened his mouth to argue, then froze as new readings appeared on his tablet. The first live-fire tests of the absurdity's weapons systems had just completed. The results defied every combat doctrine ever written, and showed a hit ratio that shouldn't have been possible with such apparently random targeting. "How?" he whispered. "We're not aiming where they're going to be," Sarah explained. "We're aiming where they won't expect us to aim, which is exactly where they'll end up trying to avoid where they think we're actually aiming." The Commodore read the test results 3 times, his expression slowly shifting from disgust to bewilderment to something approaching wonder. Finally, he looked up at the impossible ship taking shape above them. "I'll need to report this to command," he said quietly. "Tell them to send more skeet-shooting turrets," Maya called after him as he walked away. The gold plating really ties the whole aesthetic together. As the procurement team departed, Sarah turned to her unlikely crew of misfits and dreamers. "Back to work, everyone. We've got a lot more rules to break." Above them, the HMS Absurdity continued to grow, each new addition making it look more impossible. Soon, they would show the galaxy that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its technology or its numbers, but its ability to embrace the absurd. The Corvidae were about to learn that there was nothing more dangerous than an enemy who didn't play by the rules, because they'd forgotten the rules entirely. The Corvida patrol fleet emerged from hyperspace like a work of crystalline art, their ships arranged in mathematically perfect formations. Commander Sarah Chen watched them approach on the Absurdity's main view screen. Though view screen might have been too generous a term for the patchwork of salvaged displays, showing information in formats ranging from standard tactical readouts to abstract interpretive dance. "They're scanning us," reported Lieutenant Jazz Williams from her weapons station, her fingers tapping an unconscious rhythm on her console. The former pianist had insisted on replacing the traditional targeting interface with something resembling a musical keyboard. "What are they seeing?" Sarah asked. Maya Patel, who had refused to stay behind on Earth, pulled up a simulation of the Corvidae sensor returns. The absurdity appeared as a constantly shifting blur of contradictory data, like a glitch in reality itself. "They're running their scans multiple times," Maya reported gleefully. "Their systems can't resolve us into a coherent image. It's like trying to photograph a soap bubble with a quantum camera." The ship's quantum communication array crackled to life, carrying a transmission that somehow managed to sound both perfectly modulated and deeply confused. "Unidentified vessel," a crystalline voice announced. "Your configuration appears to be critically compromised. Power down immediately for emergency assistance and salvage." Sarah nodded to her communications officer, a former poetry slam champion. "This is Commander Chen of the HMS Absurdity. We appreciate your concern, but we're operating exactly as designed." A long pause followed. Sarah could almost imagine the Corvida crew struggling to process that statement. "Your vessel's power signature indicates multiple catastrophic system failures," the alien voice returned. "Your drive configuration alone violates 37 laws of thermodynamics." "Only 37," Maya muttered. "We must have missed a few." "Furthermore," the Corvida continued, "your weapon systems are misaligned by an average of 43 degrees from optimal firing positions. Your hull geometry creates impossible sensor shadows. This level of engineering failure cannot be intentional. Prepare for emergency tractor beam." Sarah smiled. "Now, Lieutenant Williams." Jazz's fingers danced across her musical targeting console. The Absurdity's weapons, a collection of mining lasers, repurposed point defense turrets, and at least one modified stellar observation array, opened fire in patterns based on free-form jazz solos. The Corvidae ships, their battle computers trying to calculate defense patterns against weapons that weren't aimed where any sane tactician would aim them, took multiple hits before their shields even activated. "They're launching fighters," the sensor officer, a sommelier by training, announced, detecting notes of confusion with subtle undertones of panic. The Corvidae fighters emerged from their carrier ships in perfect diamond formations. Sarah watched them approach, then gave the order she'd been waiting to use. "Initiate the chaos dance." Maya slammed her hand down on a large red button she'd insisted on installing on the bridge. The Absurdity's engines, each one running on different power curves derived from various natural phenomena, engaged in sequence. The ship began to move in patterns based on the flight paths of drunken honeybees, its trajectory calculated by a navigation computer programmed to interpret stellar drift as interpretive dance choreography. On the tactical display, the Corvidae fighters' perfect formations began to break down as their targeting systems failed to predict where the Absurdity would be from one moment to the next. Their shots went wide, their own movements becoming increasingly erratic as they tried to adapt to an enemy that defied prediction. "They're trying to establish a targeting pattern," Maya reported, studying the incoming sensor data. "Their neural networks are running so many simultaneous calculations they're starting to overheat." "Time to show them our special trick," Sarah announced. "Deploy the confetti." From modified cargo pods along the Absurdity's hull, thousands of small objects erupted into space. Each was a simple reflector, its surfaces covered in quantum-shifting materials that made them appear to change size and composition randomly. The Corvidae sensors, already struggling with the Absurdity itself, now had to contend with a cloud of objects that refused to maintain consistent physical properties. The alien fighters scattered, their perfect formations dissolving completely as their pilots struggled to navigate the chaos. Several collided with each other, their minds unable to process the seemingly impossible sensor data fast enough to maintain formation. "Their flagship is powering weapons," Jazz reported, "but their targeting systems are showing a 0.8% accuracy prediction. They literally cannot figure out where to shoot. Sarah leaned forward in her command chair, actually a repurposed luxury spa lounger. Send the signal. From the absurdity's bow, a massive energy pulse erupted. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. Rather, it was the focused output of all their contradictory systems combined, carrying sensor ghosts and quantum irregularities in its wake. The pulse washed over the Corvidae fleet like a wave of pure chaos. Ship after ship went dark as their perfect systems crashed, unable to process the flood of information that violated every principle they were based on. The fighters drifted powerless, their pilots possibly still trying to understand how they had been defeated by something that shouldn't have been able to fly, let alone fight. Enemy fleet is disabled, Jazz announced, adding a triumphant flourish on her console that translated into a victory dance by their targeting systems. Signal from Earth Defense Command, the communications officer reported. They're detecting the Corvidae fleet's distress signals. Admiral Santos sends her congratulations and says she wants a full report on how we managed to win a battle by breaking physics. Sarah looked around at her crew, the artists, musicians, and dreamers who had just proved that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to embrace chaos. Send word to Earth, she ordered. The HNS absurdity is combat-proven. Tell them to start building more impossible ships. As they prepared to take the disabled Corvidae fleet in tow, Sarah caught Maya grinning at her tactical display. "What is it?" she asked. "I just realized," Maya replied. "We didn't just win a battle. We taught the perfect beings a lesson in the power of imperfection. That's going to drive them absolutely crazy." The absurdity cruised through the debris field of its first victory, its impossible angles and chaotic systems humming with energy that shouldn't have existed. The war was far from over, but humanity had just proven that sometimes the best way to fight perfection was with deliberate, calculated imperfection. And they were just getting started. They're building more of them. The Corvidae High Command Central Chamber was a marvel of geometric perfection, its crystalline walls arranged in patterns that expressed the fundamental mathematical constants of the universe. But for the first time in its 1,000-year history, that perfection felt somehow brittle. First strategist Val Axand displayed the latest intelligence hologram, showing construction sites across Earth's sphere of influence, where once humans built proper warships with clean lines and logical weapon placements, now they were creating abominations. "Look at this one." Val Axand highlighted a vessel taking shape in Mars orbit. They've attached the bridge sideways. The weapons are mounted on flexible stems that wave like aquatic vegetation. The hull is purposely dented to create unpredictable radar reflections. Second strategist Merkel's crystalline features shifted in patterns expressing deep disturbance. How are they even flying? Our analysis indicates at least 60% of these vessels should explosively decompress upon activation. "They're not just flying," Val Axand replied. "They're winning." The hologram shifted to show recent battle footage. The Corvidae pursuit fleet, pride of the Empire's southern arm, engaged in combat with 3 of the new human vessels. The human ships moved like drunken insects, their trajectories following patterns that seemed based on ancient Earth dance styles. Their weapons fired in sequences derived from musical compositions. The Corvidae fleet's perfect formation shattered as their targeting computers failed to establish firing solutions. Their neural networks, evolved over millennia to recognize and counter any known combat strategy, crashed when confronted with ships that ignored every principle of space combat. The humans call this new doctrine tactical chaos theory, Val Axand continued. They're not trying to outthink our battle computers anymore. They're deliberately making their ships and strategies so illogical that our systems can't process them. "Impossible," Merkel protested. "Combat follows mathematical principles. It must. The universe itself operates on mathematical laws." "Does it?" a new voice asked. The assembled strategists turned to face High Scholar Renvix, their civilization's leading expert on extinct species. The ancient corvidae's faceted eyes caught the chamber's light as she approached the hologram. "I've been studying our earliest historical records," Renvix continued. "There are references to another species we encountered long ago. The discordant ones. We never defeated them in battle. Do you know why?" Silence filled the perfect chamber. "Because we couldn't understand them." Renvix answered her own question. "Their technology, their strategies, their very thought processes defied our comprehension. Rather than face them, our ancestors retreated, sealed off that sector of space, and eventually wrote them out of our history. Are you suggesting these humans have independently discovered the same principle? Yes. They've realized that our greatest strength, our perfect logic, can become a weakness when confronted with deliberate illogic." The hologram shifted again, showing the HMS Absurdity, the first of these impossible ships. It had begun a campaign that defied all military logic, appearing randomly in different sectors, its actions following no discernible pattern. Yet somehow, those random actions were systematically dismantling the corvidae's carefully constructed defense networks. "We must adapt," Val Aksan declared. "How does one adapt to chaos?" Merkal demanded. "Perhaps," Renvix suggested, "we must learn to think imperfectly." The very idea sent shudders through the assembled strategists. Their entire civilization was built on the pursuit of perfection. The concept of deliberately embracing imperfection was almost physically painful. Meanwhile, across human space, the revolution sparked by the absurdity was transforming humanity's approach to warfare. Dr. Maya Patel had become the head of a new division of Earth Defense Command, the Department of Applied Chaos Theory. "The key," she explained to a room full of shipwrights and engineers, "is that we're not just building bad ships. We're building ships that are bad in exactly the right ways. Each system must contradict the others while somehow still functioning as a whole." The hologram behind her showed dozens of new vessel designs, each more impossible than the last. One had sails made of quantum-shifted metal that changed shape based on crew members' dreams. Another used an engine system that powered up by powering down. "The corvidae aren't just fighting our ships anymore," Maya continued. "They're fighting their own assumptions about how reality works. Every time we show them something that their perfect minds say cannot exist, we're not just winning battles, we're making them question everything they believe." In her quarters aboard the Absurdity, Commander Sarah Chen reviewed reports from the growing fleet of Chaos-class vessels. The HMS Paradox had won 3 battles by convincing corvidae sensors it was actually flying backward through time. The HMS Nonsense had disabled an entire enemy battle group by broadcasting tactical orders in the form of limericks. "Status report from the Paradox, Commander," her eye announced, its voice modulation intentionally set to switch randomly between different Earth accents. "They've successfully tested the new quantum uncertainty drive. The corvidae fleet lost track of them because they literally couldn't determine if the ship was actually there or not." Sarah smiled. The corvidae had spent millennia perfecting the art of war, evolving beyond what they saw as the weakness of uncertainty and chaos. Now humanity was showing them that perfection itself could be a vulnerability. A priority alert flashed across her screen. Long-range sensors had detected a massive corvidae fleet approaching Earth. But something was different about these ships. Their formations weren't quite perfect. Their energy signatures showed slight irregularities. "They're trying to adapt," Sarah realized. "They're attempting to introduce controlled imperfection into their systems. Think they'll succeed?" The AI asked, its voice now carrying a distinctive Australian twang. "That's the beauty of it," Sarah replied. "Even their attempts to be imperfect are perfectly calculated. They can't help themselves. And that's why we'll win." She opened a channel to Earth Defense Command. It was time to gather the fleet of impossibilities. The corvidae were about to learn that you couldn't calculate your way to chaos. You had to embrace it fully, illogically, and preferably while playing jazz. The combined fleet of humanity's impossible ships hung in high orbit around Earth, each vessel a deliberate affront to proper engineering. The HMS Absurdity led the formation, though formation was perhaps too orderly a word for their arrangement, which resembled a Jackson Pollock painting rendered in starships. Commander Sarah Chen watched the massive Corvette Armada approach on her ever-shifting tactical display. The enemy fleet was different now. Their once perfect geometric formation showing subtle irregularities, their ships' crystal-clear energy signatures carrying slight distortions. "They're trying to copy us," Dr. Maya Patil observed from her jury-rigged science station. "But look, they're introducing calculated imperfections. Even their chaos follows mathematical principles." "How many ships are we facing?" Sarah asked her sensor officer. "Approximately 742. Give or take an imaginary number." The former wine taster replied, "Their new configurations are giving me notes of desperate innovation, with an aftertaste of fundamental confusion." The human fleet was outnumbered nearly 10 to 1. But numbers had long since ceased to be the deciding factor in this war. The HMS Paradox's quantum uncertainty drive was already making it appear to be in 3 places simultaneously. The HMS Nonsense had begun broadcasting its presence in interpretive dance formats. The newest ship in their fleet, the HMS Impossible, was running its entire command structure on algorithms derived from children's crayon drawings. "Message from the Corvette flagship," the communications officer announced. "Text only. It's different from their usual style." Sarah read the message and smiled. The perfectly modulated language of previous Corvette communications had been replaced with something almost poetic in its uncertainty. "Humans of the Chaos Fleet, we have studied your methods. We have introduced variants into our systems. We have embraced approximation. Surrender now, and we will show you the perfect way to be imperfect." "They still don't get it, do they?" Maya asked, shaking her head. "They think chaos is something you can calculate." Sarah opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, initiate Operation Beautiful Disaster." The human fleet exploded into action, or rather, into carefully cultivated chaos. Ships moved in patterns based on everything from weather systems to stock market crashes. The HMS Paradox split into its quantum superposition states, each version following a different timeline. The HMS Nonsense began firing its weapons in sequences derived from classic comedy routines. The Corvette fleet's attempt at controlled imperfection crumbled in the face of true chaos. Their ships, trying to follow battle plans that incorporated random variables, found themselves unable to cope with humanity's genuine randomness. It was the difference between an actor playing drunk and someone who had actually had too much to drink. "Their flagship is activating something," Maya reported, studying readings that scrolled across her screen in spiral patterns. "Energy signature unlike anything we've seen before." The Corvette flagship's crystalline hull began to pulse with impossible light. Space itself seemed to ripple around it as it deployed what their intelligence suggested was the Empire's ultimate weapon, a device designed to impose mathematical order on chaos itself. "They're trying to force reality to make sense," Maya realized. "They've built a machine to eliminate uncertainty at the quantum level." The device fired, sending waves of pure logic cascading through space. Ships caught in its effect found their quantum systems locked into single states, their chaos-based technologies struggling against the imposed order. But the HMS Absurdity had been built for exactly this moment. Sarah gave the order they'd been preparing for since the ship's inception. "Deploy the uncertainty engine." Deep in the Absurdity's impossible heart, a device of Maya's design spun up to full power. It wasn't so much a machine as it was an anti-machine, a system designed to amplify and weaponize the fundamental uncertainties that existed at the quantum level of reality. The two effects met in space, perfect order colliding with weaponized chaos. For a moment, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the Corvette device began to fail. Their attempt to impose mathematical certainty on an uncertain universe backfired spectacularly as the uncertainty engine forced them to confront a fundamental truth. Perfect order was itself an illusion. "Their fleet's systems are cascading," Maya reported triumphantly. They're experiencing total cognitive collapse. Their neural networks can't process the contradiction between their desire for perfect order and the fundamental chaos they're experiencing. Ship after ship in the Corvidae fleet went dark as their perfectly engineered systems crashed in the face of undeniable uncertainty. Their crews, their very minds evolved to seek and maintain order, found themselves unable to function in a universe that refused to follow their rules. Sarah opened a channel to the dying Corvidae fleet. Your mistake wasn't in seeking perfection. It was in forgetting that imperfection is what makes the universe beautiful. Humanity doesn't try to eliminate chaos. We dance with it. The battle ended not with a perfect final, but with a messy, chaotic victory that perfectly embodied humanity's approach to warfare. As recovery ships moved in to assist the disabled Corvidae vessels, Maya approached Sarah with a datapad. "We're receiving transmissions from across Corvidae space," she reported. "The younger generation. They're fascinated by what we've shown them. They're asking questions their elders never dared to ask, about uncertainty, about chaos, about the beauty of imperfection." Sarah looked out at the battlefield, where human ships that shouldn't have been able to fly were helping crystal ships that shouldn't have been able to fail. Maybe that's the real victory here. We haven't just won a war. We've shown them a new way to see the universe. A perfect ending. Maya asked with a grin. "No," Sarah replied, watching as a group of young Corvidae engineers began excitedly studying the HMS Absurdity's impossible design. An imperfect beginning. Above Earth, the fleet of impossible ships continued their random patrols, their very existence a testament to humanity's greatest strength. The ability to look at the rules of the universe and say, yes, but what if we tried it this way instead? The war was over. The age of calculated chaos had begun, and somewhere in the quantum foam of spacetime, probability itself smiled at the species that had learned to embrace its uncertainties.